Well, I'm Jessica Crisp,
I'm Brett Crisp.
and we've been married for 18 years.
We've also been attending Westover for just over 18 years. And we have a 13-year-old son, Isaac, who's in 8th grade. And we're here to talk about our journey and experience as foster parents. That was back in 2017. And it's interesting, when we were asked to share this story for the context of this series, it took me a minute to kind of connect how this experience in our life could be thought of as discipline. That's the word that's used in this section in Hebrews 12. And in this context, the word discipline really means more of a upbringing or a training or a shaping. And when we think about this experience in that context, it's easy to see how God used this experience in our life to shape us, to mold us, to be the people that He would have us to be. Our journey as foster parents started officially in 2017, some pre-work before that, but really to understand this story in the context of it, it starts a long time before that, and I'll let Jessica jump in.
Yeah, God was busy writing a story this entire time, and now when we look back on it, we can see how it's all woven together. But everything really started at a young age when I had cancer, which led to infertility. And Brett and I knew going into marriage that adoption would be the next step for us, the way we would grow our family. That's a part of God's plan. And so we, early on in our marriage, pursued adoption, and we adopted our son Isaac in 2012 as an infant. And then about 4 years later, we felt this stirring again in our hearts to really grow as a family of 4, and it felt like that was really going to be the complete piece of things. And so instead of pursuing infant adoption again, we learned a lot about and were very interested in being foster parents. So on Isaac's second day of kindergarten, we got a phone call that a little girl was looking for a foster home placement, and we welcomed her into our home that night, and she was a sweet little addition to the family. And in no time, we were madly in love with her, and she just felt like she was the perfect piece that had been missing the whole time. She was a sister to our son. They bonded so quickly together, and for us, it just felt like it was all coming together.
Yeah, probably those of you who were at Westover at that time probably remember us for that season as a family of 4. And over time, through our experience as foster parents, God really worked in the circumstances and worked in our hearts to shift our thinking about the situation to be more in line with working to reunify her family instead of adding her to our family. About a year and a half after she came to us, she was able to be reunified with her mom, with her family. And that was really hard for us. But it also started a new season where we were able to then be all a part of this bigger picture of what family can look like. You know, we went into this experience with a very specific idea of what our family would look like. And God really kind of flipped that image on its head and helped us to embrace an idea of family that is maybe a little less conventional, but was certainly His plan for us and for her family.
So as Brett mentioned, this was a really hard thing for us to go through as a family, and part of the reason that it was challenging, joyful yet challenging, was that this happened all of a sudden. So we knew there was a chance of reunification, and then suddenly we received a phone call and found out that day she's going home today in hours. Our hearts were not prepared for that. Our son was not prepared for that. We were not prepared for that. And it really impacted my view of God as my father, and just thinking, God, we have, being fully transparent, God, we have followed your plan in all of this, and yet now with open hands, I'm losing the child who feels like she's mine and ours. And I really had to wrestle with understanding God's goodness in the midst of the loss, and coming to terms with the fact that that the Lord was still at work in this, even if things were looking so different from what I had hoped for and dreamed of and what we thought this was leading to for that year and a half. And so it was something that was really challenging, yet I felt that the Lord was so gracious to me in that He did not turn away from me, even though I was saying, God, why is this happening? Why am I experiencing the loss? Why are we grieving this when we thought this was what you wanted for us? But realizing that He was faithful to walk right beside me and comfort me in the pain and the hardship, but also say, look, let me show you something even bigger than you could comprehend that is going on right now. Let's get a different perspective and see something in a way that is going on, how, the Lord is saying, I've been at work in this pain, in this hardship. I'm still your Father. I'm still faithful. I'm still good. And let me start to show you what my goodness looks like in this situation. And I think it definitely took me a while to come to terms with that.
As Isaac's parents were trying to help him along and trying to help him understand what's going on here, even, he wrestled with some questions. We had this little girl in our home that, seemed like a part of our family, and yet she was there one day and gone the next day. It created some anxiety for him, and helping him to understand, you can trust us as your parents. Just as we were walking through that experience with Isaac, God was walking through that experience with us as our Father, helping to guide us and instruct us as we went through that experience. I was thinking about Psalm 103:13 says, "As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him." And just because He's a loving, good Father doesn't mean it's not hard, and doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. He doesn't want us to pretend that it doesn't hurt. He wants to show His compassion and show His faithfulness to us in the midst of our hurt.
There were so many things that helped us through this season and this hardship and spiritually supported us. And for us as a couple, we love worship music. And so I know Brett serves in the worship ministry and I sing from where I sit. But we love worship and worship songs that speak truth in them. And I have always felt somehow connected to David in the Bible and the Psalms, and how emotional he is and yet not judged. Like the way that he'll have these huge ranges of emotions and yet a huge amount of gratitude or devastation, and it alternates between all of the things. And sometimes I just feel like we are kindred spirits in that way. And so for me, whenever I continued to wrestle and feel this grief, I found myself coming back time and time again to the Psalms. And one of the worship songs you would listen to is the "He Will Hold You Fast." And it talks about that in Psalm 139, where it says, "Where can I flee from the Lord? Where can I escape His Spirit? Where can I flee His presence?" And they're outlining all of these different places. And it's saying, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. And I, in my grief, truly felt the Lord holding us fast and holding me fast. I felt such a closeness to Him and acceptance of him through the cycles of grief that came. Whenever the first week when Elle went back home, and I would wake up and I would hear her crying, or wake up and think she was coughing and needed something, only to find the bedroom was empty. And it was a really hard process. And I continued to be drawn back to him holding us fast. Looking back at Psalm 23, where it says that he renews my life. He leads me along the right paths for his name's sake. And as much as I've heard the 23rd Psalm, I don't think I've ever really connected with that piece of for his name's sake. And it felt like the Lord continued to reaffirm to me in this that it is for his name's sake. He is doing a good work if I can just hold on and let him hold me fast, but that he is doing a good work in this.
Mm-hmm. You know, if you think about the picture of going with your kid on a hike, I was thinking about Hanging Rock. We've hiked as a family at Hanging Rock several times. I'm sure many of you have also. And you know, you walking up those steps with a little kid. I think the first time we did Hanging Rock, Isaac was probably 3 or 4 maybe. And you know, you're walking up all those steps and I'm holding his hand. And as you're walking up those steps, or when you're out on the ledge there and you're holding his hand, it's not the strength of the little kid's grip that's going to keep the kid safe. If it's relying on the kid's grip strength, they're in trouble. It's the strength of the parent, the dad who's holding the kid's hand, who's going to keep them safe. And the same thing is true with us and God. Our ability to hold on tightly is so fleeting. Thinking back over this experience now, even years later, and trying to think about it in the context of this study of Hebrews 12. We look back at verse 11. It says, "No discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." As we shared, it was not really an enjoyable circumstance. I mean, certainly there were parts of it that were very life-giving and wonderful to experience. But the grief we experienced, it was not pleasant. It was not enjoyable at the time. And then even, looking back even farther, Jessica having cancer as a child was not an enjoyable experience. I'm sure her parents would not have signed their 7-year-old child up to get cancer. Going into our marriage, we probably would not have signed up for infertility. These things are not enjoyable at the time, but later on, they yield the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Just if we go through them? No, it says that for those who have been trained by them. So if we are willing to submit ourselves to be trained, to be shaped by the experience in our lives, they will produce fruit.
And I think we saw very quickly on that the Lord was bringing fruit out of this circumstance. Elle has done exceptionally well being back with her family. The season that she was away allowed her family to prepare in a way and grow in a way that they needed. And it blessed us just by having her with us. They now have restoration and are successfully all doing life together. And with the generosity of her mom and their family, they still allow us to be an active part of the family. We celebrate holidays and birthdays together. Many of you still continue to see Elle here whenever she comes on the weekends and stays with us and comes to church. And it's just different, but we can see how the Lord was producing this fruit, that He was allowing us the honor of being one small part of this story, but it's bringing restoration and bringing His love and His goodness to a much larger family in a way that we could have never done if we had kept Elle for ourselves.
When we face difficult things in our life now and going forward, we can look back and see God's faithfulness to us during that time. And it allows us to have a different perspective. Now, do we do it perfectly all the time? No. Even within the last 48 hours, I've probably failed miserably in this area of looking at something really hard and not reacting to it in a Christ-like way. But God's faithfulness was displayed to us in such a way that it now shapes the way we face hardship in the future. We can trust that He will hold us fast. We can trust that His plans are for our good and for His glory, and that He will use the hard things in our life to make us more like Christ for our benefit, for His glory, and to display Christ to the world around us.
Yeah, it's turned into another Ebenezer stone in our life where we can say, thus far the Lord has brought us, and no matter what happens next, it's one of the many times, like when I survived cancer and when we adopted Isaac, all of these have been these Ebenezer stones where we can say, here is a representation of the Lord's faithfulness, and this has become a very lasting one for us. And whereas I previously questioned God as Father, I can see His work and all that He was bringing about in a perfect way through this entire circumstance.